Okay, I obviously love reading, but do I approach reading as a spiritual practice, or do I approach it as more a matter of escape, or more a matter of just simply tickling my brain or improving my intellect? Is there something I'm missing in this whole way of approaching books? Well, Jessica Hooten Wilson has a lot of thoughts on that topic. Let me tell you about her new book. Welcome to Books and Big Ideas, what I'm reading, what I'm thinking about, with Joel Wentz. Okay, I have here a copy of Reading for the Love of God by Jessica Hooten Wilson. Thank you to Brazos for sending me a copy for review of this book. I'm going to take you through my typical format of the main idea, the research, the readability, and then my reaction to the book. Okay, so the main idea of Reading for the Love of God is Jessica Hooten Wilson's case to what I would say is to kind of thicken our understanding of the act of reading. So it's a book about reading, basically, which, I gotta be honest, I love books about reading. It's kind of a softball pitch for me. As someone who obviously I love reading, read a lot of books, constantly reading, and I love a good book that explains why reading is good. So I might be predisposed to be very positive towards this book just by virtue of my personality and kind of what I do on this YouTube channel and all that. But I was interested in this specifically because I have read books that are like this, and I was curious if there was anything new or distinct that she would kind of be bringing to the conversation. And to tip my hand a little bit, I have to say that yes, she does bring something to it. But this book, all told, this book is kind of about, she pushes back on some kind of common foibles about reading or common pitfalls that people fall into. She pushes back on some ideas of leveraging reading merely as a means of escape or merely as a means of kind of instrumentalizing it to learn things. She talks about the act of reading as kind of actual virtue improvement, moral improvement. She talks a lot about the senses that are involved in reading, and not just like taste, touch, those senses, but actually the senses of kind of allegorizing or tropological meanings, interpretations, the intent of the author, the kind of reception of the reader. She brings that fully orbed conversation into the book. And each chapter kind of moves through, it's like almost different movements. She moves through kind of different approaches to reading, discusses the approach, talks about what's good, what might need to be changed or convicted. She even in the intro has a little quiz about what kind of a reader are you, to help you self-reflect on the way that you approach books. So it's a little bit of a potpourri almost of like different kind of thoughts about reading that are kind of pulled together. And at the end of the day, she really encourages, it's a robust defense of the possibility that reading is actually a spiritual act, a spiritual practice that involves things like humility and wonder and mystery, and that it really deserves to be an important role of a well-formed life, honestly. Just like healthy spirituality is I would argue, a part of a well-formed life. And so she brings a really strong, very winsome case for kind of that idea in this book, Reading for the Love of God. So that's the main idea. It's a little hard to summarize because she touches on so many different subtopics under the idea of reading and the approach of reading, but it really is this, I would just say, a very inviting, lovely, winsome apology for the importance of healthy reading in the healthy life of a person. So that's what it's about. Now, the research behind it, I would say this is more leans on the approachability end of books. So it's not highly academic. It's not like, I don't know, like heavily footnoted or cited. But that being said, so it's very, I'll talk about the readability in a second, but something I was really impressed with is she, is obviously a very well-read person, and she pulls in quotes. I mean, there are quotes constantly especially from fiction. Literary fiction in particular. She's just constantly quoting Dostoevsky or Flannery O'Connor or medieval writers, medieval mystics. Like, she pulls in such a wide range of quote-unquote great books and great writers, but she does it. Certain writers, this can be hard to describe. Certain writers do it, and it's a little on the nose or a little pushy, as if to say, look at how well-read and smart I am. And I have to say, I didn't get that sense whatsoever from this book. It almost felt like it's just kind of, she lives and breathes these great writers and these great books, and so it kind of just pours out of her as she's reflecting on her joy and love for the act of reading. And it comes across very, I keep using words warm and inviting, but that's really what the book feels like. It feels like a warm invitation to love these kinds of books, which is so fitting because the whole book is about loving reading, right? And I got to say, as someone, so I read a lot, I love reading, but I do have kind of a big blind spot when it comes to the classic literary fiction. I have read some Dostoevsky, I have read some Flannery O'Connor, but there's great gaps in my own knowledge of the more classic literary stuff, and reading this book and seeing those quotations and seeing the ideas that these writers bring that she's pulling on to make her own case for love of reading, it made me want to go back and read some of that stuff. So wow, I mean, that's more of the implicit kind of impact of her argument. She could explicitly say, you need to read this because XYZ reasons, or she could say, reading is a wonderful act, and just like so-and-so says, this is the impact it has, or just like this character in the Brothers Karamazov says, and that's more of the style and the feel of this book. So this is very, very cohesive, very thoughtful, very, like I said, well-read, very intelligent, it flows very naturally, and again, very inviting. So that's, I kind of just combined a lot of my categories into one. That's the research and a bit on the readability, but I'll say a little bit more about the readability now to keep it as a separate thing. First of all, the book is short. The chapters are also short. But one more thing I haven't mentioned yet that helps with the readability that I think is so smart in this book in particular that I haven't seen in other books about books is she includes little biographical snapshots of some heroes of hers in the reading life. So Augustine, Dorothy Sayers, Frederick Douglass, for example, she has these, she calls them bookmarks. And so as she moves through a couple topics in a few chapters, she includes a couple page biographical snapshot of this, Julie of Norwich is the other one, there were four, of this historical reading figure who was very well read and very found reading very important in their life. She includes this biographical snapshot, and it's such a smart way, it's such a smart inclusion in a book like this because it ends up taking the reader through some concepts, some conceptual chapters, and then a story of a person, and then more conceptual chapters, and then a story of a person, and each mini story fleshes out the stuff that she's discussing in the chapters in between. So yeah, I love that, and that really sets this book apart from other books about books, at least that I've been exposed to. So that's something that she brought to it that I thought was really wonderful and increased the readability of it. And like I said, the book is short, the chapters are short, they're very easy to get through, and even when she gets into some of the more of the heady stuff like the tropological or allegorical kind of senses of reading, none of it is inscrutable, none of it is too much, and it doesn't take you out of the overall argument she's making. So highly readable, very, like I said, warm, very inviting. And then finally, my reaction. I've kind of tipped my hand to the way that I've been acting this whole review so far. I loved this book. I really loved this book. It made me think a lot about another book that I read, maybe a year ago or so, which was Austin Carty's book, The Pastor's Bookshelf. And I interviewed Austin on this channel as well. It reminded me a bit of that book, and just that, it's this book. Both those books are this outpouring of a serious love of reading, and the reading life just kind of oozes out of the book, and that's the case for Jessica Hooten Wilson's new book too. And so, in some ways, it's almost not a fair review because anytime you get someone who loves books so much to read a book that is just a resounding, warm defense of the act of reading and the importance of books in a life that's well lived. I mean, of course I'm gonna love that. I'm just it's just like a pitch right down the middle for me. But I really did love it, and I loved it for some of those reasons I just articulated: the style of it, the research behind it, and the way that she brings in those voices from the past, and then those biographical snapshots she includes. And some of the creative touches, like that quiz at the beginning to get you to reflect on your own approach to books and your own style as a reader, is really smart, really specific, really distinct. And I'm really glad that she wrote this book. There's a lot of books about books out there, but this one really deserves a slot on the shelf, so to speak. It's a wonderful defense, wonderful invitation to the reading life, and makes a strong case that part of a life well lived is a life of humble, wondrous, in awe style of reading. So those are my thoughts on Jessica Hooten Wilson's wonderful, wonderful book, Reading for the Love of God, from Brazos Press. So if this wasn't on your radar before and you are a lover of books like I am, then I would heartily encourage you to pick this one up. Go check it out. So thanks, as always, for taking some time to watch.